I propose we already get started and everyone can then trickle in. Αν μπορούμε να αρχίσουμε να καταγράφουμε πάλι. Εντάξει.
Okay, thanks guys. It's been, it's already 11:31, and since my supervisor is at Hitler on time, so I'm gonna start hoping that people will come inside. So my name is Jae Cho. I am one of the Belgian crews of Anthony's group, and I'm honored to speak in front of all these people, and especially as our first speaker, I'm after, of course, Professor Karamanis. As a session for optimization under certainty, I'm going to talk about chance-constraint programming. And actually, there is a link to the presentation before a little bit, because it's also about reserve sizing, but in a European context. But the difference is not endogenously, but exogenously in the context of European guideline with the chance-constraint programming. So hopefully it will be interesting to you. Actually, chance-constraint programming is often used, but it's quite rare to see that it's solved in optimality, especially in practical context. But this time I would like to introduce such a case in power system applications. So one of the main characteristics of power system is the fact that we need to balance supply and demand continuously in real time in order to secure the system frequency to avoid the system failure such as blackouts. And what makes it especially difficult is the fact that we have varieties of generations in terms of their flexibilities. And nowadays, even there are uncontrollable generators such as a wind turbine and the solar panels. So it makes it even more difficult. So what is often done is apart from the markets that corresponding to real-time operations, such as real-time markets or balancing markets in the EU, there are several types of forward markets, including day-ahead markets or intraday markets, to make investment decisions or commitment decisions for inflexible generators. And based on the forecast error, based on the forecast, and because of the forecast error, there are discrepancy between the supply and demand in real time due to forecast error, of course, and also maybe unexpected contingencies such as a line failure or generation unit failure. And in order to cover these imbalances, we need to have certain level of reserves. And there is obvious trade-off between the costs for reserve capacity and system reliability. If we want to have a high level of system reliability, then we need to have a high level of reserve capacity. That costs a lot of money. So that motivates our problem, which is reserve sizing or reserve dimensioning problem, to find the optimal level of reserve while having the certain level of system reliability. And this problem becomes more interesting when we consider the several zones at the same time across Europe, for example. So we call this a multi-area reserve sizing problem because the European Union encourages all the zones to coordinate in order to enhance the market efficiencies or securities, etc. And of course, one of the biggest sources of uncertainty is imbalances for each zone. By the time when we need to decide the size of reserves, but also on top of this, for I guess also similar in the US, but especially in Europe, we use for balancing market zonal representation of the network, for example, which is called ATC model, and that is also uncertain. First, mainly because it depends on the residual capacity of the physical network. and it is highly nonlinear to this residual capacity because of this zonal approximation. So we need to consider these line capacities also as uncertain parameters. And that is what challenges this problem even more. And the most interesting part of this problem is the fact that the system operation guideline of the EU explicitly specifies the probabilistic requirements to cover the imbalances for at least 99% of the time based on historical records. And that motivated our approach to use chance constraint programming explicitly for this multi-area reserve sizing problem. So before we jump into the direct mathematical formulation, I'd like to start with the simple illustrative example to see why this problem is interesting and why this can be complex. So let's start with the easiest one, the two zone cases. So there is a line, but let's think that there is an unlimited capacity, and the imbalances are normally distributed. They're independent, of course, and with mu and sigma 100. And in this case, if I ask what is the size of the positive reserve, which meets the reliability target of 99%, because we don't have time, I will just go through. It's easy because we can easily get the variance of the summation of imbalances, and also we don't need to care about the line, so we can think it as a one zone. So in that case, we can get the using the number of z value, we can the number relatively easily. And already, when we add the capacitor limit, it becomes quite complicated. And actually, we can have the analytical solution using several layers of integrals with a lot of different cases, etc. But it's already so much more difficult. And what if the assumption of the Gaussian distributed is not valid anymore, or also independence is not valid anymore? And most importantly, for this problem, what if the capacitor limit, known as ATC, is also uncertain? Because on top of the imbalances, there are two different types of uncertainty that are hard to find the real correlation, also because of the big nonlinearity. So how should we solve this problem? That's why we try to tackle this problem through complex optimization problem using chance constraint optimization problem. So this problem can be formulated into two-stage chance constraint formulation. The objective function is minimizing the summation of the size of reserves, RZ, for each zone Z. And the superscript plus and minus refer to the direction of the reserves. So it covers both the upward and downward reserves, so negative and positive imbalances at the same time. So that is why we need to consider both of them. And here, it's just for the sake of simplicity, the coefficients of the R is 1, but there is no reason to keep it as 1. If because of the procurement cost, if you want to change something, it can be also changed to other coefficients as well, subject to the probability that this first stage variable R, which corresponds to reserve size, has to be within some kind of feasible region. Uncertain feasible region F has to be greater or equal to a certain level of reliability. And so how do we define this uncertain feasible region F? So it is the region of a feasible region for R, for first variable, where there is a feasible second stage variable P and F, given the imbalances delta and the ATC, so capacitor limits capital T. So when the uncertain variables are given, then there should be the feasible active balancing power and corresponding flows on top of it. So that is how we define with this region. But this feasible region is not easy to see how it works because of the existence of this second stage variable. So that is why it's this problem is difficult, and that's why we need to formulate in a two-stage variable, because by the time we decide the size of reserve, so R here, that the information of delta and the capacity limit, capital T, is limited. But by the time after that, when uncertainty is revealed, that we need to know how much probability that they are violated or not. So the main approach that how we deal with this uncertain parameters are well known as a sample approximation. So what we use is just to generate scenarios for each uncertainty realizations and see how it works. But especially this way is quite suitable for our problem because of the system guideline. So because they say the imbalances has to be covered based on the historical records, so we can't replace these uncertain scenarios for the uncertain parameters by the historical records. So it is suitable for this approach is quite suitable for our case. And one of the easiest, more straightforward way to tackle this and reformulate into the form that we can solve is using the BGAM style reformulation, which means we just use the first stage variable R and the second stage variable at the same time by introducing a binary variable UI, which means when the scenario I is violated, then UI becomes 1, and when the scenario is not violated, then it becomes 0. So this binary variable indicates like which scenario can be violated among all the scenario sets. But the problem of this reformulation is that we cannot solve the large scale problem, especially if you want to solve the optimality with this binary variables, because of the big LP relaxation gap between the optimality and the LP relaxation. But we can use this as a heuristic method. First, we solve the LP relaxation and pick the epsilon times large and capital N largest values, and we just fix them to 1 and solve another optimization. So then it becomes a series of LP, so we can guarantee the polynomial time algorithm. So we can use it as a benchmark or heuristic method. But what we want to do is going one step forward to solve this to optimality. And one of the main ideas of how to do it is this slide. So we find, instead of using the second stage variable directly to the reformulation, what we want to do is find the projection of this in the left side to the space of R, so that the resulting inequality, resulting one becomes just the inequalities, linear inequalities, so that inside of the probabilistic constraint that it's only linear inequalities, then when it becomes, it's easier to apply certain set of integer programming techniques, which is called mixing inequalities. And then we can also reformulate again into the form that is very strong, in a sense that the LP relaxation gap is very tight, that by solving just 1 or 2 LP, we can find the binary variable, we can find the optimal solutions. So let's go one by one step forward, but I will just try to give some insights instead of going to every details. So one of the biggest contribution of this paper or of this work is to find the minimal projection in a closed form, because normally finding the projection is not an easy thing. It is the complexity of the double exponential. So it is normally regarded as a difficult thing, especially for the large scale. But for this problem, we found the projection in a closed form, and also we proved that it's minimal. And the fact that it is minimal is important because these constraints, these linear inequalities, are inside of the probabilistic constraint. And when we reformulate that, the numbers of the inequalities matter. So when the more inequalities there are, the performance becomes lower. So the fact that we have the minimal number of the inequalities, that affects the high performance of our algorithm. So the resulting projection is the bottom side, but before I go through this, I need to introduce some definitions. So the first definition I'd like to introduce is called connected vertex set. And even though mathematically it's a little bit difficult to rigorously define, but actually what I want to say about this connected vertex set is the set of vertices that are connected, as the name says, on a graph. For example, the set of vertices 1, 3, 4 is connected, is the element of a connected vertex set, whereas 1, 4 is not directly connected, so they are not in the connected vertex set. So for example, if we enumerate all the elements of the connected vertex set, it includes all the singletons and all the two pairs where it's connected by a line, etc., until that for all the for all the vertex set, the whole vertex set by itself. And the second definition is more common. So that is called the maximum input flow or maximum output flow. So it is also defined on a directed graph with certain vertex set S. So when the certain vertex set S is given, for example, here 2 and 4, then as the name suggests, maximum input flow is the maximum amount of input flow to these vertices, and the maximum outflow is vice versa. So there is a meaning of this minimal projection. So actually what it says, what it suggests is that the summation of the reserves of certain combination of the zones has to be greater than equal to the summation of the imbalances. I mean, of course, but net of the maximum output flow and maximum input flow. And the another intuition that we can get here is that what we need is only the elements of the connected vertex set instead of the power set of the vertices, which can be much bigger. So that's what makes it minimal and makes it small enough. So and by having this closed form, what we can also have is, just to illustrate, for two zoning examples, we can see how the feasible region looks like. For example, given the delta, so for both of the zones, there is 100 negative imbalances, and then the two zone line is there's a line capacity of 50 in both directions. So in this case, for example, 0, 200 is not in the feasible region because it can only send 50 to the other, and then it cannot cover the imbalances in the other zone. Whereas 100, 100 is covered within this feasible region. So we can also illustrate how the feasible region looks like, and it's dynamic. It changes depending on the number of capital T and delta imbalances, of course. So now we have this minimal formulation. Then, as I said, again, it becomes the left side becomes as a right side, which is much easier to deal with in the format of linear inequalities. And then here we use sample approximation again. And if we apply the big M formulation for this specific types of inequalities, the resulting sets are called mixing set. And this set is largely studied in the integer programming community, so that we can use all kinds of techniques that are already developed. And for example, we know how to define the convex hull. So for those who don't know what convex hull or what does it mean by defining convex hull means, we can basically solve mixed integer programming by solving LP if we know the convex hull. But the story is not easy as it is, because there are another sets on top of this mixing set. So it becomes a little bit more complicated, but also we can have some other types of inequalities that are facet defining. Facet defining means that are the subset of the convex hull defining. So all those cuts make this LP relaxation much more smaller so that we can solve mixed integer programming much more fast. So we can use all this kind of integer programming techniques and using reformulation, then this is the end result. But even though there are many things hidden to come to this conclusion, one of the biggest advantage of using this reformulation is easy to implement, because what we need is just a small pre-process, calculates some coefficients, and if we just put these coefficients into this model, and we can directly use the commercial solvers, which is not the case for normally for many types of mixed integer programming. They require additional types of algorithm that you need to implement. And normally that is not so favorable in practice, even though academics like to do those kind of complicated things. So for this kind of for this project especially, I try to make it as simple as possible so that it can be used in practice quite well. And the last, I will finish by showing some computational results. It's also used in this map in the Nordic countries with 10 different zones, and imbalances and the network capacity data is perturbed with the distribution. And the first I want to show is the effect of coordination. So there are 3 scenarios of the cases where the first scenario says a 0 ATC, which means 0 coordination between all the zones. And the second scenario is a connection when there is connection within the countries, how it would evolve. And the last one is when all Nordic countries work together, then how much efficiency we can gain. And so this is the result. So the left part is just saying the total, and the other 3 is for for each countries. As you can see from the 0 ATC scenario, every time we include more coordination, it drops a lot. And what's remarkable is that the last 4th one is the benchmark solution, where we basically assume that there is not unlimited ATC, which means it's just as if it's a one zone. And by just optimally organizing our capacities and then reserve capacity, we can have, it's not the same, by the way, but it's almost same as the unlimited ATC. So that was the quite interesting result that we could get by solving. So that also motivates why we need to solve optimality instead of heuristics. And the second one I want to present is the comparison between the heuristic method. Of course, the first thing is the efficiency gain for the 1%, which is the most difficult problem and which corresponds to the system guideline in EU. And basically, there is efficiency gain of 10% or 11%. It depends on the countries and etc., but it amounts to, let's say, 100 million euros at least per year. And the more interesting part is the right part, which is about total solving time. What we normally guess is heuristics can be faster, even though it cannot find the optimal solution. But in this case, at least for up to certain instances, it is not the case. We can solve this problem much faster with this new algorithm than the heuristics. And I will explain the reason briefly why. Because the heuristics, we have to, the size of the LP is very big, because the capital N, which is the size of the scenarios, are directly included and multiplied in the heuristic method, whereas our reformulated version is very compact, in the sense that because we already do this all kinds of projections, and the reason why it can be compact is this Q is actually epsilon times N, and epsilon is less than or equal to 0.01. So generally, generally the right side of the LP can be very compact compared to the other LP. And at the same time, it depends on the instances, but often that when we see the ATC data, what we can observe is sometimes it's 0 and sometimes it can be very big. So when it's very big, then obviously the maximum input and maximum output flow of that flows are very big, and which makes this coefficient below 0. And even though it's not intuitive, but when it becomes below 0, what it says is that it's redundant. So it kind of already filters out all the redundant scenarios and only form this problem only with the necessary scenarios and informations, make it very compact. So by doing that, we can solve it much more efficient. So that's why we get this little bit counterintuitive performance compared to heuristics. So if we press this to the kind of extreme, how far we can go for this 10 zone large problem, apparently we can solve sample sizes with 500,000 for the most difficult problem, which is epsilon 1% and within the 30 minutes. So, and by doing that, because of this high performance, we can do sensitivity analysis, because one of the critics of using sample approximation is it's under approximation issue. But we can indeed see that when the sample size is low, it kind of underestimates because of the Anyway, so but we can see that this convergence of while we the sample size as sample sizes grows. So with having this high performance algorithms, we can see what is the right number of sample sizes, and it also helps to do doing more dynamic resolve dimensioning as well, because we can solve it more fast in every daily basis, for example. So yeah, that is the conclusion. Thank you very much.
Coming, Dimitri, one thing that Jehun was too modest to mention is that this has been adopted for some operations in Statnet, which is the Norwegian, no, Svenska, right? The Swedish TSO.
Hi, Dimitris Papadaskalopoulos from University of Patras. Great work. Two questions, really clarification questions. One is, especially given what Anthony just mentioned, for which reserve products is this applied? Can it be applied for any product or just AFRR or MFRR? And secondly, I was just wondering, maybe you mentioned it at the beginning and I lost it. What is the assumption in here regarding the interaction between reserves and day-ahead market? So do you assume in here that this sizing is done after the day-ahead market is cleared? So you have the information on what, for example, percentage of the ATCs is used for the day-ahead market. So what is the remaining capacity, let's say, for reserve exchanges? Or do you assume that day-ahead market and reserve market are, let's say, co-optimized, cleared at the same time?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. The first question was about the products. Yeah, it can be used for both MFR and AFRR. And this algorithm is quite basic, so it doesn't. So it can be used. I don't know. It can be used for both products as well. And then, of course, what we need to change is the data. So because MFR with longer time granularity and AFR in a shorter time granularity, and of course there can be correlations as well. And then that's how the TSO is normally used. But both of the products it can be used. So yeah. So it's free from which product we use. And the second question was about the timing of the size of the reserves. Actually, it's quite dynamic. So the original project was that they have this kind of reserved dimensioning, maybe for year or maybe for monthly, but after that, they want to become much more dynamically into daily basis. And even in a daily basis, as you mentioned, it can be before day ahead market or after day ahead market. I think there are room for interpretation, and that changes the data, of course, but algorithms can be readily available in any cases. For this computational, you mean? Or yeah, it's done before. Yes.
Just two clarifications on that. One is there was a follow-up project. So Nside was the one to pick up this concept and then push it with Svenska. And I think there was a follow-up assignment where they did joint sizing of AFR and MFRR as restoration reserve as a total, and then they have some heuristics of then filtering the signal and taking a sub-signal to do a AFR only or MFR only. It varies depending on the country. But the inception here was to do sizing as input to the day-ahead reserve market or earlier forward markets, before typically in the Nordics, the day-ahead energy market. So there's a calculation that takes place even before the reserve market of day-ahead as input. It's the demand of the TSO for that reserve.
Thanks, John. Do you think your technique can be used to jointly size and procure reserve, so that you have like this interaction between the cost of reserve in a different zone, and so that you can minimize the procurement cost on the whole?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So yes and no, because first is we can't. So how we do it is, I mean, the easiest thing we can do is changing the coefficients of that. But I know that is not what people want. They want to go further. They want to directly control the costs of the second stage variable, like, something like that. In that case, it becomes a little bit more complicated, but there is a way to deal with it. But maybe I didn't try, but maybe the loss is we need to compromise the performance gain, I think. But at least if you want to directly use this kind of method with a high performance, what you can do is find some kind of compromise for procurement side to make it this coefficients changing. So in that case, we can directly use it, and otherwise it's possible, but it can be difficult, and I don't know how much compromise we need to make by doing that, if it answers.
Yeah, continuity ETH Zurich. So I wonder if your approach can directly be used if you modify a little bit the network constraints, the formulation of the network constraints, like with flow-based market coupling, for instance. So is it only due to this simple kind of transportation network type of formulation?
I think it depends on what kind of flow-based model you use, of course, but the direct usage of like physical based on physical network, like all the Kirchhoff's law included, no, but certain easier types of flow-based network, I think it can be readily available. I mean, but we need to change a little bit, of course, modify a little bit, but that would be okay. But yeah, it all depends. Yeah.
I think there's a question online from Alain Marianne from, I guess Alain is these days with Acer, about interaction with co-optimization. Alain, you want to try and talk? See if we hear you.
No, it's simply first, it's a great work that you have done, and I'm impressed by the results. And then I was wondering, because co-optimization is a big issue for the moment, which was the interaction with the co-optimization process.
Right. Thank you, Alain. Yeah, it's a really great question. Indeed, there is no direct conclusion or interaction with the co-optimization, because actually, as I told you, unlike the presentation before by Professor Karamanis, it's a exogenous way of doing it. But But at the same time, I mean, it depends on how we deal with it. So even with the exogenous decision making of the reserve sizes, that amount given, we can still do the co-optimization. So I think it can be done. So this algorithm can be used even for considering the co-optimization. Or maybe they want to do more, like in the US, they want to do more endogenously, then in that case, it might not be directly related, but it all depends on the also European rules or guidelines. But at least for this work, I really wanted to include the guideline in 2017, and which is still valid for now. But yeah, if it changes later, maybe it might not be directly related.
Maybe one thing to add to what Jehum said is that if we want to use EU jargon, the assumption in this project was EU sharing context. So the idea is different bidding zones can access the same reserve capacity, but you're hoping they won't access it simultaneously, and the whole probabilistic formulation handles that. So it would be a bit a contradiction if you set up co-optimization without reserve sharing, but then do the sizing assuming reserve sharing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Michael Karamanis from Boston University. Taking the opportunity of Acer listening in, I would like to ask a high-level question. I remember about 15 years ago or so, there was a competition that Acer was adjudicating on regarding an exchange that would allow Nordics and Benelux and so on to have dynamic hourly trading, and the basis of that was some sort of a transportation model. Did this go forward? Who won the competition, and is it? And I was sort of involved. I was asked to give an opinion, and my suggestion was that that a simplified load flow model, like for example the 20 zone flow model that they have in Italy and so on, might be used instead of a transportation. Did this take place, and is it being used, this exchange?
It should be Alain. Yeah.
Question for Alain.
Yeah.
Jehum, you want to attempt that, or no clue? So no clue, Alain, can you save us, or?
Yes, it was, if I remember, it was beginning 2010, we discussed that. So in Europe, we started first with a market coupling, so a zonal model between the Nordic countries with a few bidding zones. And then there was this question how to couple, it's a strange term, but to couple the Nordic area with the Central West region, where we started also around 2006, and then 2010, we had a trilateral market coupling, 2006, and then the 5 countries, the 5 Central West countries in 2010. And then there was that question how to couple or to put together the Nordic and the Central West region. And we have used what was called an ATC market coupling, which in fact used poorly the transmission capacities and neglect internal constraints, but it works. I mean, we had some results. If it was optimal, no, it was far from optimal, but we lived with that for several years. And it was only in 2015 that we have implemented a flow-based market coupling, where we try to mimic or to resemble to flow gates in the US, to have a few of them to represent some internal constraints. But of course, then we had new problems with discrimination between internal and cross-border trade. And it's only recently recently, a few years ago, that we have that mechanism of flow-based implemented to the full core region. So it means Central West and Central East Europe. And then recently, a few days ago, we have implemented the same mechanism in intraday. But you have to know that with flow-based, there is always a possibility. So the TSO keep a possibility to limit the transmission capacity because the security domain is not well mastered by the calculation. So there is a possibility for a TSO to reduce transmission capacities if he had the impression that he will be not secure. I don't know if I have an answer to your question. So it's an approximation. It is not fully safe. The TSO are still looking to do something if they feel that there will be a problem, and that's the way it works for the moment. But then if you add some discretionary possibilities from the TSO, it can end up with problems, of course.
Great. Jacques, I'm going to unfortunately defer to the break. We can thank Jehum for the very
Thank you very
nice
much.
presentation.